Welcome to 181 Days. I'm Jack, and I think today I have a shoe for you that might be one of the best travel shoes ever. These are the Vans Ultrarange 2.0s, and I think Vans may have made the best shoe ever to travel in. They're amazing. Does it look like I've done 100 miles in these? Because I have, and my feet feel pretty good. Because we're in Japan to try and test these things out, and let's get into what makes them good and what makes them bad.
Well, hello, and welcome to 181 Days. I'm Jack, and I'm here with a review of the Vans Ultrarange 2.0 SE shoes that I just spent 135 miles in walking through Japan. And I'm really impressed with these shoes. I don't know if these look like they've done 135 miles. I feel like they're in pretty good shape for what I put them through. So I'm here to do 5 things I like about them, 2 areas for improvement. And just before I get into that, so I just did 12 days in Japan, 135 miles of walking. That's 5 marathons of walking. It was a crazy intense trip. And before we went, I wanted to make sure that I had a good shoe to go with because I just didn't really have any good walking shoes. And I didn't want to bring my Asics. I didn't want to bring running shoes just because I feel like I always stand funny and, you look like a tourist when you do that. So I'd kind of been on a hunt for good walking shoes that looked good and kind of did what they needed to. I ended up buying a pair of on cloud runners, and they just didn't work for me. They hurt my knees actually. They felt really nice when I was standing, but walking actually hurt quite a bit. So returned those and ended up going to REI. I was trying on all these different walking shoes. The staff was like great. They were just like bringing me different things. I was doing laps around the place, and as I was leaving, I saw these, and I was like, I'll give Vans a try. Of course, just like every millennial, wore Vans forever when I was a kid. Actually have a pair of Vans kind of just like day shoes that they make now, and they're really comfortable. So these were in the walking shoe section, so I decided to give them a try, and it was like, Cinderella's slipper. I put my foot in, and it was perfect. And I knew it was going to be perfect. They say you shouldn't have to break in walking shoes, and that's exactly what these felt like when I got them. So yeah, I think they're really good shoes. I'm amazed how well they held up after all we did in Japan without really even caring about them. So let's get into why I think that they are really good and what could be a little bit better. Okay, so diving into the 5 things I really like about these shoes. And I'm going to add a little bit of the technology in the shoe that I learned about while I was researching this. But the first thing I really like about the shoe is the comfort. It's a super comfortable shoe. It's crazy. It has something called an Ultra Cush midsole to keep your foot kind of comfortable while you're walking. And I really felt that because something that I feel when I wear running shoes to do, just a day out or something like that is when I stand, the middle of my foot hurts quite a bit. And I think that's just because running shoes are made that way. They're made to kind of spring you forward, right? These are made for just kind of going. Van says they're made from going from the beach to the next beach for surfers, but it's become just their most popular day shoe. And I understand why, because you can do pretty much anything in them. And one thing I noticed with this really is that you can literally just stand and your feet don't hurt, your knees don't hurt, your back doesn't hurt. And I think that that's actually kind of rare in shoes now. Like you can just stand around and feel pretty good in these, and I like that. Again, 135 miles in these, and I was super comfortable the whole time. I actually brought a pair of Cole Haans, and I slipped them on for a minute, and I got a blister while walking in those shoes, and I kind of rehabbed it from these shoes. Really good toe space. My toes never felt crowded. My foot never felt fatigued walking around in these, except for maybe the end of the day where we did a ton of miles. So yeah, like number one is definitely comfort. Okay, so like number two for these shoes is the tread. You can kind of see here, it's this waffle sole. It's kind of like a throwback to the old Vans, but it's almost more of a boot lug. It's very hard. It doesn't feel hard when you're walking, but it feels very hard when you're doing things like walking over gravel or uneven terrain or, climbing maybe a grassy hill or something like that. You feel like you have a lot of control in these shoes, and I really like that. It also didn't have me worried about, if I was stepping on glass or walking over maybe something that I was worried about or that I would be worried about in tennis shoes. Wasn't worried about that at all with these because they're kind of tough. And I also really like that the bottom comes up and kind of rides around the front here because A, this is suede and it does get dirty, and I'll get to that. But B, I tend to kick my toes on a lot of things, especially in Japan. You're running down the subway, you're running up the subway stairs, and you're kicking stairs. And I kicked this a whole bunch of times, and I thought, oh, I got something on the suede. It's going to look crappy for the rest of the trip, and it didn't because you kind of have this little bumper here, just like a boat, that protects the front of the shoe from getting dirty. I thought it was kind of a weird design element when I first got the shoe, but I really like it now that I've used it a bit, because it really protects the shoe and it protects your feet a little bit too, because this is kind of like a bit of a cushion. So, yeah, really like the tread on these. Gives you a lot of confidence when you're running around. Okay, so one more note on the tread. This is a 7 millimeter heel to toe drop. So they're not the zero drop shoes that everyone wears, but I personally don't like those that much. I feel like I flop around like a guy wearing scuba diving flippers when I have those on. So I thought that this was a nice amount. I never dragged my feet on these, which is nice. Like I never caught my toes or walked weird. So I like that a lot. All right, my third thing I really like about these shoes is the weight. Vans says that these are 299 grams and they feel pretty light when you wear them. I have an orthotic in mine, a custom one for my feet because I have flat feet. But even with that, they don't feel very heavy compared to a lot of shoes. And I wore these for 15 hours of flying both ways to Japan and back. They felt a little bit constricted when I was on the plane and there for like 10 hours and I didn't have compression socks on. But otherwise, I mean, I never thought about the weight of these. They didn't make my feet tired. They're pretty light. Uh, and I think it's great. It's a really good shoe for your foot. Okay. Fourth thing I like about these shoes is the look. And when I was buying these, I was kind of thinking like, well, if I'm going to compromise between a walking shoe and not wearing a running shoe to look like a total tourist, this is a fine look. But the more that I wear them, the more I actually like them. Like they blend in pretty well. This is the olive color, and they actually make these in a welded version as well. So there's none of the suede, none of the different pieces of fabric. It's all just like one like unibody construction shoe. Those look pretty cool too, but I kind of like this one with the canvas and the suede. It's different and it looks good with jeans. It looks good with a lot of different clothes. I think I wore these on like our dressy night that we went out in Japan and I still looked pretty good. So yeah, I like the look of them. I think they're unique. You have kind of the Vans swoop here, so people still know you're wearing Vans, but it looks like an adult walking shoe, which is nice and I feel like hard to find, honestly. So yeah, like the look. Okay. The fifth thing I really like about these shoes is the durability of them. I did not really take care of these while I was in Japan, partially because I knew I wanted to do a review on them, and partially just because you shouldn't have to think about that when you're out having fun on vacation. I think that these are built well enough that you can kind of knock them around and not really worry about what happens to them. And like I said, I was on a lot of different terrain with these and kicking things, and these don't look like they've done 135 miles. Even, there's maybe a little bit of burn on the back just because I walk on my heels, but they look like they're in really good shape for having done 5 marathons worth of walking in a relatively short amount of time. So I will say also, I mentioned they're light and the materials are lightweight. So they dry out pretty quickly. I actually accidentally poured a beer, it fell off my tray table on the plane and it went all down my leg, directly into the shoe, directly on my seat as well. That was fun. But these dried out really quick. I think they were dry before I had gotten up to actually like dry off my pants, which is nice. The suede, I treated the suede before I went, and I'll get a little bit more into that. But after treating the suede, I got caught in a couple rainstorms and I poured beer on these by accident and there's no stains on them. So I think that's really nice. There is actually one tiny little stain on a part of the suede that I did not treat. So again, we'll get into that. But yeah, they're durable. They took no damage, and I think that's really nice for $100 shoe. These are $100 flat, so that's nice. Okay, let's get into the two areas of improvement for these. So I mentioned the suede, and let's talk about the suede. My first area of improvement is the suede. So there's a lot of suede in this shoe. You can see it's in pretty good repair after a long trip. When I got these, I had them on. I was walking around just to make sure they felt good around the house, and I dropped something on the suede, and it made a big spot that I had to clean off, and it took a lot of effort to clean it off. And I hadn't treated these yet, so lesson learned. I treated the other one right away. I have some, water repellent suede treatment. Treated these twice with it, and after that, totally fine. I got caught in rainstorms, and I mentioned that I poured some beer on these by accident. Nothing. I mean, it completely repelled everything. But there's a lot of suede in these shoes, and for an adventure shoe, suede gets dirty, right? And I mean, even if you're not going to be dropping stuff on it, if you're walking through dirty grass or something like that, suede can pick that stuff up. So my first area for improvement, I guess, would be the suede. Like I mentioned, they have a welded version of these that doesn't have suede on them. And maybe it's just because this gray suede catches some stuff, but I think that is mitigated by putting suede treater on it. So once I treated it, literally nothing gets on these. It's like completely impermeable, which is great. So maybe they already solved it with their own version. You can solve it with your own, but it is interesting to have suede on an adventure shoe. And there's a little suede up top here as well. So there's quite a bit of suede on these. But again, I think it looks nice. So area for improvement, they might have already improved a little bit. Just put some treatment on it. My second area for improvement is a little bit in the construction, and I actually didn't find either one of these things annoying, but I've seen some other people talking about these. The first is that the tongue doesn't have a little bit of like a loop in the tongue to keep it stuck to the laces, so it can slide a little bit. And it did slide on me a tiny bit. It slid over to the side. I never thought about it during the day, though. I never actually had to worry about it. I never fixed it. It didn't bother me at all. But I've seen some people online really be bothered by this because they say that it falls to the side. You could just take a tiny bit of string and sew a loop on here. I mean, just a piece of thread and it would stay where it's supposed to. So I don't really see that it's that big of a deal. The second thing is because these are made to be pretty breathable, the inside, and I don't know if I'll be able to show this on camera, but the inside has some interesting construction in the way that the elastic is so that these stay on your feet well. And you can feel that when you first put the shoe on, you can kind of feel it. And I was worried that I wouldn't stop feeling it, but after like 4 steps, I completely forgot about it. Never thought about it over 135 miles. But something to be aware of. I noticed that the welded version, I did try those on, felt a little more crowded to me compared to these, which is surprising because they seem to have fewer pieces. But again, I didn't really make that much of a difference for me. I thought these are still super comfortable. So that's the Vans Ultrarange 2.0 SE in olive. I think it's a great shoe for $100. I'm probably going to buy a couple more pairs of these just to have some alternatives. I wore these recently again after coming back, and it was like putting Cinderella's shoe on. Just to be able to go out and wear these and know that you have a comfortable shoe. Again, I think it's increasingly hard to find a shoe that just works and does everything. And I'm really surprised at these. I'm surprised at the price point. One thing I also forgot to mention during this review is these have something that Vans called heel lock technology, so your foot doesn't slip out of it. And I actually felt that. I didn't have any slipping. Usually my heels slip out of shoes. Not at all in these. They're just super comfortable. Highly recommend them. I think that Vans knocked it out of the park here. I think Vans and Converse are a little bit responsible for all of us having flat feet. So it's nice to see them making some shoes that address those things for us. So I like these. Yeah, highly recommend the Vans Ultrarange 2.0. There's a lot of colorways. I got these at REI. You can get them a lot of places. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. We have some more videos coming out, and we have some Japan content. So if you like that, if you have any particular questions, let me know in the comments. Do you have these? It seems like a lot of people have these. I haven't seen them on a lot of people, but people seem to have them and have a lot of opinions about them. So let me know what you think, and appreciate you watching.